The air in the funeral home chapel was thick with the cloying scent of lilies and unspoken resentments. I sat in the third row, far enough from my mother Denise to avoid her withering glances, but close enough to hear her perform for the handful of mourners. Clifford's memorial was a quiet affair, just like the man himself. He deserved more, but Denise had always kept his circle small, isolating him. My name is Rosalie Reyes, and I'm 27. Clifford, my stepfather, had been the closest thing I ever had to a real parent. He married Denise when I was 7, a quiet, kind man who saw me, truly saw me, even when my own mother looked right through me. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike, who patiently explained why the stars twinkled, who celebrated my small victories in school that Denise dismissed as barely adequate. Denise, at 52, was a force of nature, all sharp edges and calculated charm, but only when it served her. To me, she was a constant low-level hum of criticism and neglect. The lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bun, cleared her throat. We are here today to honor Clifford Martin. As per his wishes, I will now read a portion of his will. My cousin, Jason, 30, shifted beside me. He'd always been Denise's golden child, the one she paraded around while I faded into the background. I caught his eye and he offered a weak, sympathetic smile. I just nodded, focusing on the lawyer. She read through the usual bequests, a few minor things to distant relatives, a donation to a local charity Clifford supported. Then she paused, adjusting her glasses. And to Rosalie Reyes, Clifford's stepdaughter, he bequeathed the specific sum and property. A gasp escaped Denise's perfectly painted lips. I felt her eyes on me, burning. He wouldn't leave you a cent, she hissed, loud enough for a few heads to turn. Her voice was laced with a venom I knew well. He was practically broke when he died, thanks to his bad investments. I ignored her, my heart thumping. Clifford had always been careful with money. Broke? That didn't sound like him. The lawyer, unperturbed, continued, Rosalie, if you'd please come forward. I walked up, my legs feeling strangely heavy. She handed me a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. It felt significant, heavy with meaning. I clutched it, my gaze meeting hers briefly. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps? I retreated to my seat, Denise's glare boring into my back. I waited until the service was over, until the last mourner had offered their condolences to Denise, who, predictably, played the grieving widow to perfection, and until Jason had offered me a quick, awkward hug before disappearing. I found a quiet corner in the empty reception hall, my hands trembling slightly as I broke the seal on the envelope. Inside there was a notarized letter, a bank statement, and a small folded piece of paper. I unfolded the letter first. Clifford's familiar, neat handwriting filled the page. It was short, direct. It confirmed the bank details, a separate account opened years ago, now holding exactly $180,000, transferred into my name just days before he passed. My breath hitched. $180,000. It was an unimaginable sum. Then I read the small folded note. It was just a single line, scrawled in a way that suggested urgency, a final desperate plea. Don't tell your mother. She'll ruin it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Clifford, ever the protector, even from beyond the grave. My mind reeled. Ruin it. What did he mean? Had Denise tried to get her hands on his money before? Was this why he'd been so secretive? I stared at the bank statement, then at the chilling instruction. My first instinct was to confront Denise, to wave the letter in her face and demand answers. But then Clifford's words echoed in my head. She'll ruin it. He knew her. He knew what she was capable of. A cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't just about money. This was about something deeper, something Clifford had tried to protect me from. I could tell her, watch her rage, and inevitably she'd find a way to twist it, to take it. Or I could listen to Clifford, hide the secret, and figure out what he meant. My decision was made. I folded the papers carefully, tucking them deep inside my purse. I would say nothing, not a word, not yet. I would figure out what he meant, and then, maybe then, I would understand why Clifford, in his final act, had given me not just a fortune, but a warning. The envelope with Clifford's last words felt like a live wire in my purse. Don't tell your mother, she'll ruin it. The words echoed in my head, a constant hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. I knew Denise. I knew her capacity for destruction, her talent for turning anything good into something she could control or exploit. Clifford's warning wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. The first person I called was Raquel. Raquel Sanders, 27, has been my best friend since high school. She's a software engineer, sharp as a tack, and the only person I trust implicitly. I drove straight to her apartment, the envelope still burning a hole in my bag. Cliff left me something, I blurted out the moment she opened the door, pulling me inside. I laid out the notarized letter and the bank statement on her coffee table. Raquel read the documents, her brow furrowed, then picked up the small folded note. Her eyes widened. Don't tell your mother. She'll ruin it, she read aloud, then looked at me. Rosalie, this is huge and terrifying. I know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He knew her. He knew what she'd do. I need to move this money fast and discreetly. Raquel, ever practical, nodded. Okay, first we need a secure, untraceable way to move it. A trust is probably best. You'll need a lawyer, someone who knew Clifford, maybe? Someone you can trust not to breathe a word to Denise. That's when Adeline Rivera, the lawyer from the funeral, came to mind. She'd handled Clifford's will, and her demeanor had suggested a quiet competence. I called her office the next morning, explaining only that I needed to discuss an urgent private matter related to Clifford's estate. She agreed to meet me later that week. The meeting with Adeline, 63, was surprisingly straightforward. I laid out the letter, the bank statement, and Clifford's chilling instruction. Adeline read everything, her expression unreadable until she finished. She looked up, her gaze direct. Clifford was a very private man, Rosalie, and a very shrewd one. He ensured this was legally watertight. Setting up a trust is the wisest course. It will protect these funds from any future claims, especially from anyone who might try to contest his wishes. She didn't mention Denise by name, but her meaning was clear. Within a week, with Raquel's help navigating the online banking portals and Adeline's legal expertise, the $180,000 was moved into a newly established ironclad trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. Life at home, however, grew increasingly tense. Denise was like a bloodhound, sniffing out any deviation from her perceived norm. I still lived in the house I'd grown up in, a constant reminder of her suffocating presence. She'd started making pointed comments, thinly veiled accusations. You've been awfully quiet since the funeral, Rosalie, she'd say over dinner, her eyes narrowed. Something on your mind? Or, Clifford left me with nothing, you know, nothing but debt. Some people are just so selfish. She'd sigh dramatically, glancing at me. I'd just shrug, pretending to be engrossed in my food. One afternoon, Jason came over. He was Denise's favorite, always had been. While Denise would dismiss my academic achievements or artistic pursuits, she'd praise Jason's every mediocre accomplishment. Rosalie, you got a B plus. Well, Jason just won the school spelling bee. It was a constant low-level erosion of my self-worth. Jason and I had always had a complicated relationship. He was her favored child, but he also saw her true colors, even if he rarely challenged her. He was in the kitchen with Denise, who was rattling off her usual complaints about Clifford's supposed financial irresponsibility. Jason caught my eye as I walked through. "Rough few weeks, huh, Rosalie?" he mumbled, almost too quietly for Denise to hear. "Not just for Aunt Denise, I guess. Some secrets are harder to keep than others." He immediately looked away, busying himself with pouring a glass of water. My blood ran cold. What did he mean? Did he know something? Or was it just a random, unsettling comment? I dismissed it for now, but the seed of suspicion was planted. I became meticulous about hiding any trace of the money. My purse was always emptied, my documents scanned and stored on a heavily encrypted drive Raquel had set up for me. But even the most careful person makes mistakes. It was late one night, almost midnight. I was in my room scrolling through my phone when I heard the creak of my door. Denise stood there silhouetted against the hallway light, her face a mask of cold fury. In her hand she held a small crumpled slip of paper. My heart sank. It was a receipt from the bank, a deposit slip for a small amount I transferred from my personal account to the new trust, a test run I'd forgotten to shred. "This," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "was in your purse. Explain yourself, Rosalie." She took a step closer, her eyes glittering. "That money is mine." Denise stood in my doorway, the crumpled bank receipt clutched in her hand like a weapon. Her eyes, usually so adept at feigning concern or sweetness, were cold and hard. "That money is mine," she repeated, her voice a low growl. I didn't flinch. Years of her emotional manipulation had built a wall around me. The fear was still there, a knot in my stomach, but it was buried deep. Clifford's warning had given me a new kind of resolve. "It's not yours, Denise," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor I felt inside. "It's mine. Clifford left it to me." Her face contorted. "Don't be ridiculous. Clifford was practically destitute. He had nothing to leave. He was irresponsible, always frittering away his pension. I had to make so many sacrifices just to keep this house afloat after he died." She launched into a familiar tirade, a well-rehearsed performance of the long-suffering wife. She talked about her sacrifices, her struggles, the burden of Clifford's supposed financial mismanagement. She even dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though no tears appeared. I just stared at her, stone-faced. I'd heard this song and dance 1,000 times. The self-pity, the blame, the subtle twisting of reality to make herself the victim. It used to work, used to make me feel guilty, make me doubt myself. Not anymore. Clifford's letter had shattered that illusion. "He was broke?" I challenged, my voice flat. "That doesn't sound like Clifford. He was always so careful." "Oh, you wouldn't know, Rosalie," she sneered, dropping the act. "You were too busy with your little hobbies to pay attention to real life. He was a drain, a constant drain." I decided to change tactics. Accusations wouldn't get me anywhere. Information would. "Why don't we just call Brian Gill?" I suggested, naming Clifford's longtime financial advisor. "He'd know the truth about Clifford's finances." Denise's eyes flickered a momentary hesitation. "There's no need to bother poor Brian," she said too quickly. "He's an old man. He wouldn't remember the details." That hesitation, that sudden aversion, was all the confirmation I needed. The next morning I called Brian Gill, 58, Clifford's financial advisor. He sounded tired, a little gruff, but polite. I explained I was Clifford's stepdaughter, Rosalie, and I had some questions about his pension. I didn't mention the inheritance directly, just that I was trying to understand Clifford's financial situation better after his passing. Clifford was a meticulous planner, Brian said, his voice softening. Always had his affairs in order, very disciplined with his pension. He had a good steady income from it. Denise said he was frittering it away, that he was practically broke. I ventured, testing the waters. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Broke? Brian sounded genuinely surprised. No, that's not right at all. Clifford's pension was quite substantial. He had it set up for monthly direct deposits, a very comfortable amount. He was always quite comfortable financially. Monthly direct deposits, you said, I pressed. Were they always consistent? Another pause, longer this time. Well, mostly. There were a few unusual withdrawals in the last couple of years, large sums not part of the regular disbursements. I remember questioning him about them, but he just said it was for the house. Very vague, not like Clifford at all. I thought perhaps he was doing some renovations, but he never elaborated. My heart hammered in my chest. Irregular transactions, large monthly withdrawals. For the house. Denise's words about Clifford being a drain and her sacrifices suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. I thanked Brian and hung up, my mind racing. I immediately called Raquel. You were right, I told her, my voice tight with a new kind of anger. Denise was lying. Clifford wasn't broke, and there were unusual withdrawals from his pension. Raquel was on it. Okay, this is where we get forensic, she said, her voice buzzing with professional interest. We need to find out where that money went. Do you have access to any of Clifford's old bank statements, utility bills, anything that might have financial records? I did. Clifford had a small, locked filing cabinet in his study full of meticulously organized papers. Denise had dismissed it as Clifford's junk and hadn't touched it. I spent the next few days poring over every document, every statement, every bill. Raquel helped me set up a spreadsheet, tracking every incoming and outgoing penny. It was tedious, mind-numbing work, but as I delved deeper, a pattern began to emerge. The unusual withdrawals Brian mentioned lined up with large, round number deposits into an account I didn't recognize. An account that, on closer inspection, bore my name. It was a joint account. But I'd never opened a joint account with Clifford. I'd never even seen this bank before. I pulled up the account details online, my fingers trembling as I typed. There it was, clear as day, a joint checking account opened 5 years ago in the names of Clifford Martin and Rosalie Reyes. And then I saw the signature. It was a crude forgery of my own. My blood ran cold. Denise had opened a hidden joint account in my name with forged documents and had been siphoning Clifford's pension into it for years. This wasn't just about the inheritance. This was about a calculated years-long deception, and now I knew exactly what Clifford meant when he said, "She'll ruin it." She already had. The discovery of the forged joint account sent a cold wave of clarity through me. This wasn't just about protecting Clifford's final gift. It was about years of calculated financial abuse. Denise hadn't just been draining his pension, she'd been doing it under my forged name. The audacity, the sheer nerve of it, was breathtaking. I immediately called Adeline. Her voice, usually so composed, held a note of grim satisfaction when I explained what I'd found. A forged signature on a bank account, she stated, her voice dry. That's a serious offense, Rosalie. We can use this. It proves a pattern of financial manipulation and fraud. Within days, Adeline had filed preliminary legal measures. The first step was to block Denise from accessing anything tied to Clifford's estate, including any accounts she might have opened or manipulated. This wasn't about the $180,000 in my trust, which was already secure. This was about everything else, about shutting down her access to any remaining assets Clifford might have had, and more importantly, about sending a clear message. Adeline explained it would be a court order, a legal freeze on her assets related to the estate, pending further investigation. It was the first strike. The tension in the house was a palpable thing. Denise was agitated, pacing, muttering to herself. She hadn't been served the court order yet, but she could sense something was wrong. She'd snap at me over trivial things, her eyes darting around as if searching for an invisible enemy. Then there was Jason. His comment at the funeral, "Some secrets are harder to keep than others," had been nagging at me. Coupled with the discovery of Denise's long-standing fraud, it made me wonder how much he knew or suspected. I found him alone in the kitchen one afternoon, picking at a bowl of cereal. "Jason," I said, my voice low, making sure Denise wasn't within earshot. "What did you mean, some secrets are harder to keep? At the funeral? About Clifford?" He froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked up, his eyes wide, then quickly looked away. I don't know what you're talking about, Rosalie." "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping closer. My voice was firm, a new edge to it I hadn't known I possessed. "Denise has been siphoning money from Clifford's pension for years, into an account she opened in my name with a forged signature. She told Brian Gill that Clifford was frittering it away, that he was broke. That's a lie. She's been stealing from him." "Did you know?" Jason's face went pale. He pushed the cereal bowl away. "Look, Rosalie, I can't get involved." "You're already involved," I countered. "You knew something. You hinted at it. Did you tell Denise about the money Clifford left me? Is that why she confronted me?" He flinched. She asked me to keep an eye on you. She said Clifford was being irresponsible, and she needed to make sure he wasn't doing anything stupid with his money. I just, I told her I saw a bank receipt in your purse. I didn't know it was that much. I swear." He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "She's always been like this, Rosalie. You know that." "Like what, Jason?" I pressed. "A thief? A fraudster?" He avoided my gaze. "She's controlling, and she'll do anything for money. You're not the only secret she's kept, Rosalie, not by a long shot." My breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" He shook his head, pushing his chair back. "I can't. She'd kill me. Just be careful, Rosalie. She's dangerous when she feels cornered." He got up and practically fled the kitchen, leaving me standing there, a fresh wave of unease washing over me. "You're not the only secret she's kept." "What other secrets?" I spent the rest of the day trying to piece together what Jason might have meant. It wasn't just about money, he'd implied. It was something else, something personal. Clifford had always been a man of quiet habits, but he had a few quirks. One of them was a small, antique safety deposit box he kept hidden in the back of his closet, behind a stack of old photo albums. He'd always kept it locked, and I'd never thought much about it. Denise had probably never even noticed it. That evening, after Denise had gone to bed, I carefully retrieved the box. It was heavy, made of dark wood with brass fittings. I remembered Clifford telling me once that the key was hidden in his favorite old gardening book, The Resilient Garden. I found the book, a worn copy with dog-eared pages, and sure enough, a tiny, intricately carved brass key was taped inside the back cover. My hands trembled as I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with a soft thud. Inside, nestled amongst some old letters and a few faded photographs, was a thick envelope. My name was written on it in Clifford's neat hand. I pulled out the contents. There were several documents, official-looking papers, and a faded photograph of a young woman holding a baby. My eyes scanned the text on the first document. It was an adoption certificate. My brow furrowed. Adoption papers? But for who? It wasn't mine. I knew my own birth certificate, and it certainly wasn't Jason's. I looked at the name on the certificate, Sophia Clark, and the birth date, decades ago. Clark. That was Denise's maiden name. My heart began to pound. Sophia Clark. Who was Sophia Clark? And why would Clifford have her adoption papers? A chilling thought began to form, a new unsettling piece of the puzzle. Sophia Clark. The name on the adoption papers echoed in my mind. Clark was Denise's maiden name. The birth date on the certificate indicated she was born when Denise would have been around 16, a half-sister. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Jason's cryptic words, "You're not the only secret she's kept," suddenly made horrifying sense. Denise had a child before me, a child she'd given up, and she'd hidden it from everyone, including Clifford. He must have found out and kept the papers, perhaps as a form of protection, or simply because he was a man who held on to truths. I immediately called Raquel. Her gasp on the other end of the line was audible. "Rosalie, this is next level. Your mother is a walking crime spree." "I know," I said, my voice tight. "But what do I do? Clifford kept these. He must have wanted me to know." Raquel, ever the strategist, suggested, "Find her, discreetly. If she's willing to talk, her testimony about Denise's past could be invaluable. It paints a picture of a consistent pattern of manipulation and deceit, which would strengthen your case against Denise." It took me a few days of careful searching online, using the information from the adoption papers. Sophia Clark, born 29 years ago. I found a LinkedIn profile, a social media presence. She lived a few states away, an accountant with a quiet, unassuming online life. She looked nothing like Denise, or me for that matter. She had a softer face, kind eyes. I drafted a careful, anonymous-looking email explaining only that I had some information about her biological mother, Denise Clark, that might be important. I included a scanned, redacted copy of the adoption papers. I didn't mention who I was or my relationship to Denise. Just yet. I didn't want to scare her off. A day later, I received a reply. It was cautious, skeptical, but curious. She agreed to a video call. The call was awkward at first. Sophia, 29, was reserved, her eyes wary. I introduced myself, explained my relationship to Denise, and laid out the whole story. Clifford's inheritance, his warning, Denise's lies about his finances, the forged account, and finally the adoption papers. I watched her face as I spoke, seeing a flicker of pain, then a slow dawning recognition. "She gave me up when she was 16, Sophia said, her voice flat. "She told her parents I was a cousin's baby she was helping to care for a few weeks before I went to my real family. They never knew. She kept it a secret from everyone. She said I was a mistake, a burden, that I would ruin her life." Her eyes, so similar to mine in their guardedness, met mine. "She told my adoptive parents she wanted no contact, ever, said she wanted to pretend I never existed." The similarities were chilling. The same language, the same emotional abuse, the same calculated deceit. "She told me Clifford was broke, that I was a burden, that I'd ruin her life," I said, the words echoing in the quiet of my room. We talked for hours. Sophia recounted stories of Denise's early life, her relentless ambition, her casual cruelty, her ability to charm outsiders while tearing down those closest to her. It was like looking into a distorted mirror of my own childhood. She described Denise's cunning, her financial opportunism even then, how she'd manipulate people for small gains. It was all eerily similar to what I was experiencing now. I want nothing to do with her, Sophia stated firmly. She's toxic. She's a black hole. But if you need me to testify, to tell the court what she did, how she lied, how she abandoned me and then pretended I never existed, I will. Not for her, but for you and for Clifford. He sounds like he was a good man. A warmth spread through me. I had a sister, a real connection forged in shared trauma. It was a strange, bittersweet comfort. The next morning, the calm shattered. My phone rang, vibrating angrily on my nightstand. It was Denise. Her voice was shrill, laced with pure, unadulterated rage. Rosalie, what have you done? She shrieked, her voice cracking. I just got served with a court order. My accounts are frozen. Everything. You did this, didn't you? You little snake! How dare you? The first strike. It had landed, and it felt good. Denise's voice, a raw, unhinged shriek, clawed at my ear. Rosalie, what have you done? I pulled the phone away from my ear for a moment, the sound of her fury almost painful. I haven't done anything, Denise, I said calmly, deliberately keeping my voice even. The court has simply frozen assets related to Clifford's estate, pending an investigation into some irregularities. Irregularities? She screamed, the word dripping with venom. You call this an irregularity? My accounts are locked. I can't access anything. How am I supposed to live? This is all your fault, you ungrateful little witch. Clifford would be rolling in his grave. She launched into a torrent of pleas, then threats, then back to pleas. She cried, real tears this time, about being ruined, about Clifford leaving her nothing, about her sacrifices for our family. She tried every trick in her book, the guilt trip, the victim act, the sudden, tearful appeal to my supposed filial duty. But her performance felt hollow now. I knew too much. I knew about the forged account, about the siphoned pension, about Sophia. Her tears were just another manipulation. I'm sorry you're in this position, Denise, I said, and I almost meant it. Almost. But this is a legal matter. It's out of my hands. You can lift it, she wailed. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you don't want this. Please, Rosalie, I'm your mother. No, I said firmly. I can't and I won't. I hung up before she could start another tirade. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a peaceful silence. The next day I met Adeline at her office. The atmosphere was different now, less about initial setup and more about strategic offense. She greeted me with a rare, almost imperceptible nod of approval. Your mother has been served, Adeline confirmed, getting straight to business. She's attempting to appeal, of course, but the evidence of the forged account is quite damning. This freeze is just the beginning. She slid a stack of documents across her polished desk. Clifford was a very thorough man, Rosalie. He anticipated many things. When he made you the beneficiary of that initial $180,000, he also quietly enacted a second provision in his will. He made you the successor trustee of his entire estate. My jaw dropped. Successor trustee? But Denise was the executor, wasn't she? She was, Adeline confirmed, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. But Clifford amended his will 2 years ago. He quietly replaced Denise with you as the successor. It was a conditional clause, only to be enacted if he passed, and if there was evidence of financial malfeasance by the primary executor. He didn't trust her, Rosalie, not with his legacy, and certainly not with yours. He knew she tried to get her hands on everything. A wave of emotion washed over me. Clifford. He had been protecting me, planning this for years. He'd seen Denise for what she was, even when I was still trying to deny it. He hadn't just given me money, he'd given me power. So, what does that mean? I asked, my voice a little shaky. It means you now have the legal standing to pursue all of Clifford's assets, Adeline explained, including the pension funds that were siphoned off into that fraudulent account. We can sue to reclaim every penny she took. She pushed a pen across the table. These are the papers to enact that suit. It will be a civil case for fraud and embezzlement. We have a strong case, especially with Sophia's potential testimony about Denise's long history of deceit. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about dismantling the woman who had spent a lifetime trying to dismantle me. I signed the paperwork, each stroke of the pen a deliberate act of defiance. That evening, back in the house that had once felt like a cage, I started to purge. I went through old photo albums, not the ones Clifford had, but the ones Denise curated. Photos where I was always slightly out of focus, or where Jason was beaming in the foreground. Old journals from my teenage years, filled with anxieties and self-doubt, fueled by Denise's constant criticism. I built a small fire in the backyard fire pit, the kind Clifford used to light for us on summer nights. One by one, I fed the photos, the journals, the physical remnants of her toxic influence into the flames. They curled, blackened, and turned to ash, releasing a faint, bitter smoke into the night air. It felt cleansing. I was still watching the last embers glow when my phone buzzed. It was Raquel. "Rosalie, you need to hear this," she said, her voice tight with alarm. "Someone just tried to break into my apartment. My security camera caught it. It was Jason." My blood ran cold. Jason. Trying to break into Raquel's apartment? Why? And what was he trying to retrieve? The documents? The financial records we'd been compiling? He was trying to cover his tracks. The news about Jason trying to break into Raquel's apartment had shaken me, but it also solidified my resolve. He was desperate, trying to get his hands on the evidence we'd compiled. It meant he was more deeply involved than I'd initially suspected, likely aiding Denise in her schemes. But that was a battle for another day. Today was about Denise. The phone call came a few days later, just as Adeline had predicted. It wasn't to me, but to Denise. I was in the kitchen making myself a cup of tea when I heard her phone ring in the living room. Her voice, initially confident, quickly turned shrill, then incredulous, then utterly devastated. "What do you mean, judgment?" she shrieked. "What assets? This is outrageous." "You can't do this." I walked into the living room, tea in hand, and watched her. Her face was blotchy, her eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen there before. She was on the phone with Adeline. I could hear the lawyer's calm, measured voice even from across the room, a stark contrast to Denise's rising panic. "No, no, this is my money. Clifford left me nothing. This is all I have." Denise wailed, clutching the phone so hard her knuckles were white. "You can't take it." "You can't!" She listened for another moment, then the phone slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. She stared at me, her eyes unfocused, as if seeing me for the first time. "It's done," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She said the judgment went through. Most of my accounts are seized. The trust is secured permanently with you. You're the sole beneficiary and the estate executor." A wave of quiet satisfaction washed over me. Clifford's final provisions, meticulously planned, had come to fruition. His trust, the $180,000, was mine irrevocably, and now I was in control of his entire estate. The power had shifted. I walked over to her, slowly, deliberately. The house, once her domain, now felt like a stage for our final act. "That's right, Denise," I said, my voice low and steady. "It's done, just as Clifford intended." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of her old venom returning. You think you've won, don't you? You think this is over? I'll fight you, Rosalie. I'll fight you until my last breath. You're nothing but a greedy, ungrateful child. I brought you into this world. I sacrificed everything for you. The familiar tirade, but it lacked its usual punch. It was the desperate flailing of a cornered animal. You sacrificed nothing for me, Denise, I countered, my voice devoid of emotion. You took, you manipulated, you lied, you stole from Clifford for years while pretending to be the victim. You even forged my name to do it. Her face went from rage to a sickly pallor. I don't know what you're talking about. Those are lies. Clifford was a fool. He was careless with money. No, I said, shaking my head. He wasn't. He was careful. He was just trying to protect me from you, and he did. I reached into the large envelope I was carrying, the one I'd prepared with Adeline's help earlier that day. I pulled out a single legal-sized document and placed it on the coffee table in front of her. This, I said, my voice barely a whisper, is the final piece. Denise's gaze dropped to the paper. Her eyes scanned the bold lettering, then the smaller print. Her breath hitched. It was a legal notice, a summons. Denise Clark, you are hereby notified that a civil lawsuit has been filed against you by Rosalie Reyes as executor of the estate of Clifford Martin for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, specifically pertaining to the unauthorized and fraudulent withdrawals from Clifford Martin's pension and the creation of a joint bank account using a forged signature. Her hand flew to her mouth, a choked gasp escaping her lips. The color drained from her face completely. The paper trembled in her hand. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the document, then at me. The rage, the defiance, the manipulation, it all drained away, leaving only a hollow, empty shell. She collapsed into the armchair behind her, a silent, crumpled heap. Her world, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, had finally imploded. She was utterly, completely broken. I stood there for a moment looking down at her, the woman who had cast such a long, dark shadow over my life, the woman who had made me feel worthless, unloved, and invisible. Now she was powerless. Now you know what it feels like to be powerless, I whispered, the words hanging in the air between us. I turned and walked out of the living room, out of the house and out of her life. I didn't look back. Weeks later, the air in my small apartment felt lighter, cleaner. The scent of lilies and unspoken resentments had been replaced by the comforting smell of my own brewing coffee. The house I'd grown up in, the one Denise had turned into a gilded cage, was now a distant memory. I hadn't set foot in it since that night. The legal fallout had been swift and decisive. Adeline, true to her word, had ensured every detail was ironclad. Denise's appeal against the asset freeze was denied. The civil suit for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery was moving forward. The evidence of the forged joint account, coupled with Brian Gill's testimony about the irregular pension withdrawals, was overwhelming. Sophia's willingness to testify about Denise's long history of deceit and abandonment further cemented the case. Denise, stripped of her financial power and her carefully constructed facade, had predictably crumbled. I heard through a distant relative that she'd sold off what little she could, packed up and moved out of state, cutting off contact with most of the family. The golden child, Jason, was now under scrutiny himself. Adeline had made sure the police were aware of his attempted break-in at Raquel's, and his complicity in Denise's schemes was being investigated. He was facing charges for aiding in fraud and likely a very uncomfortable future. I hadn't spoken to him since that day in the kitchen. My relationship with Sophia, on the other hand, was blossoming. We talked almost daily now, video calls turning into comfortable silences, then shared laughter. We'd found a common language in the wreckage of our mother's lies. She was coming to visit next month, a real in person meeting that felt both exciting and a little surreal. We were two branches from the same twisted tree, finally finding each other. So the money, Raquel said one evening, as we sat on my couch, a half-eaten pizza box between us, still sitting untouched. I nodded. The $180,000 in the trust, Clifford's gift, remained exactly where it was. It wasn't about the money anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It's not about the money, I repeated aloud, almost to myself. It's about everything else. Raquel, ever perceptive, just nodded. You did it, Rosalie. You got justice. You broke the cycle. I took a sip of my tea, the warmth doing little to thaw the chill that sometimes settled in my chest. I did, I agreed. But I wonder, did it heal me? Or did it just fill me with a colder silence? The question hung in the air. The satisfaction was undeniable, a deep, resonant hum of vindication. But there was also a hollowness. The years of fighting, of being on guard, had left their mark. The anger had been a powerful fuel, but now that the fire had consumed its target, what was left? A quiet, almost unsettling emptiness where the constant hum of resentment used to be. I thought about Clifford, his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness. He hadn't sought revenge, he'd sought protection. For me, he'd given me the tools, the knowledge, the power to protect myself, and in doing so, I had dismantled the very person who had tried to break me. The silence stretched, not awkward, but contemplative. I looked around my apartment, a space that was truly mine, free of her influence. I was 27, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The path had been ugly, filled with revelations I never wanted to uncover, but it had led me here, to a place where I could breathe. Clifford gave me a gift, not the money, power, protection, choice, and I chose to burn the blueprint of her lies.